Okay, I think it's high time to start. We are already running late. So, welcome everyone to the second day of Modem 2014, of the special session where we will hear about social media for creative expression, communication, and content. We have 7 presentations as far as I'm concerned, and I think we should just go straight to the point and invite Christopher Koelsch to speak about the project Whisperers. Welcome, Christopher.
So, good morning, everyone. Thank you for coming here this morning, and thank you, Koelsch, and everyone for organizing this and everything at the conference this year. So, I'd like to begin with some news clips that you may or may have not seen, I'm sure, in the news currently. I'll start with this
The
one.
second shoe fell late today. They're looking at your internet access as well, plugging directly into Facebook, Google, YouTube, Yahoo, and 5 other big names. In short, a direct line into your online life.
And then also this clip.
But something else is flying high above that likely won't catch your eye: drones. And those unmanned vehicles are being used to spy on U.S. citizens.
And then finally this clip.
Last Friday, the U.S. government, for the very first time, provided legal notice of its intent to try a criminal defendant using evidence obtained from its warrantless wiretapping program. Unlike previous cases, this gives the defendant's legal counsel an opportunity to challenge the constitutionality of this evidence.
Okay, all 3 of these new clips are from last year, what they all have in common. And all 3 of these actions are from the U.S. government, still in this effect, obviously, in 2014, as you may have heard. So these are questions now that we're still grappling with today. What does it mean to monitor private metadata is a question that I was asking myself of a country's own citizens. And what does it mean to have a statewide surveillance as legal, being the overreaching law? What then is actually considered private data? But I was concerned with namely one point: what are the emotions behind surveillance and the relationships amongst peoples who trust their secrets to others? I also asked myself who feels that they have that responsibility to convey data and information to others. What are these people like? And is it better to defend freedom or to prosecute in the name of freedom? So I asked myself when designing this experience all these questions, but I also asked myself when looking at news headlines, has there ever been a time where state surveillance left such a profound psychological impact upon its peoples? And if so, did we really learn from our actual history? How could I use the historical context to convey this experience in the guise of a museum immersive experience? So I designed the Whispers. It's an interactive scale model, digital environment built as a scale model with its own digital UX and UI. The Whispers entails the communication of whispering and its effects on familiar relationships within historical Soviet families and their neighbors and their friends. I wanted to use the user of this project to gain insight somehow as to how those who practice a certain communication with very, very low voices creating new motions of mistrust, lost love, and heartbreak in all these relationships that we're speaking of, therefore suddenly becoming enemies of the people, of the state through surveillance, and disappearing permanently. Close relationships here are easily fractured. So I was envisioning when I designed this tight, confined, controlled spaces in these Soviet tenements and apartments, where friends, loved ones, and those who had known each other for years were now the subject of suspicion due to a variety of matters. And these reported Soviet citizens were sent to the Gulag. These Soviet internment camps where massive populations perished. So reporting any infraction on new governmental orders, citizens with matters of anything like vested interests, concealed jealousy against others, disguised their patriotism as a way to survive this essential new kind of insufferable living. So not to go into the background of the whole history of this, of the inspiration for this piece, a little bit of a background dealing with Stalin's 5-year plans, which was a thunderous output for industrial goods known as the Great Purge, called for collectivization on farms and in cities for communist equality of living. And the structure of this collectivization involved a new allocation of living spaces. For example, a city apartment here in Moscow that once housed one family now had to previously make room for 8 other families within the same space. So this is from the collateral of the Whispers. It's a bit dark here. Which included this poster stating an atmosphere where in these spaces, for example, daughters spied on mothers and brothers perhaps reported on sisters. People whispered out of fear, parents whispered out of fear of being claimed a quote enemy of the people by their own children. So with fear as this kind of new method of speaking, this new sense of communication, it was the Soviet duty's job to even report on a loved one. And those who were under suspicion of using the black market, for example, well, this is really, really dark. I apologize for that. To feed their family, who listened in the dark to forbidden broadcasts, and who were thought to have a couple extra rubles in their purse. Let's see if I can lighten this. Quickly disappeared. There we go. Okay, so again, those who were in suspicion of using, for example, the black market to perhaps feed their family, who listened in dark to broadcasts they were not supposed to, or who had a couple of rubles, extra things in their purse, quickly disappeared. So you have this new architecture of compartmentalization, and it consisted of peasant farmers, kulak families, the lower middle classes, or the middle classes in the city. Any individual family with something that another individual family desired was subject to suspicion. So families at dinner would whisper for fear of being heard by another family in the same compartment. Individuals maybe having an extra bathroom in their compartment would be reported out of jealousy from others. And even those who had like perhaps 2 extra chickens to feed a meager family were also reported. So I asked myself, what was this emotion like to trust absolutely no one? And what was it like to live in a state of claustrophobia? And that's constantly, emotionally and physically. What I also was examining was, along with WikiLeaks and the practices of the United States National Security Administration, relevant precedents at this point that I was examining were the exhibit designs of Friedrich Kiesler and his exhibitions where the actual user would be actually physically unable to move through the space. Also, there was installation Janet Cardiff's work with enclosed spaces, such as the Cabinet of Curiosity Symphony and her Whispering Room, which was controlling light in darkened spaces. And the project exhibition also bases its inspiration from Pulitzer Prize-winning author Orlando Figes, based on his title, The Book That Whispers. And this is his tweet about the project that I was very proud to say. So I constructed a scale model, which functioned as a prototype and installation piece. It allows the user to experience a dollhouse-like structure, which represented a model of Russian Trashjovi, which tenement housing built during this time, yet at the same time it's a composite of time and form for all of the next 4 or 5-year plans until 1990. Standing 5 feet high, minus its pedestal, and 8 feet long, with varying reveals, doors, windows, and we have these pipes here which act as conduits for perhaps up halfway throughout the entire structure, going into unknown places. And I wanted to use digital interactivity for its operation. So we have the schematics involving the use of the software of jitter and max through the amplifiers of microcontrollers. And the outputs of all these amplifiers and the outputs are all light, audio, and video. These outputs consisted of electroluminescent panels with light and video clips that acted as a glimpse into inner compartments' suspicious activities. So here we have a family at dinner, seen through damask wallpaper, having a private conversation. We also have a defigured photo of Stalin inside a doorway and 2 silhouettes of men, and that's some of the illuminated imagery. The interface here, as you can see, is skewed and not to scale. It's evident that this pipe is larger than the window on its edifice and larger than the rest of the surrounding windows also. So I want to leave it to the user to figure out how to use this thing, this gadget, and how to engage the building. What event is actually an output, and how does scale affect its input? I wanted to keep this atmosphere of unknown ambiguity to keep with its entirely dark theme. The videos here obtain footage shot from above, unusual angles, perspectives, so the sense of perspective is always distorted, and people will move normally, behave every day as apartment dwellers would, yet that's actually what the normal activity had the capacity to be suspect for Soviet individuals. You know, every emotion could be distorted as a reported story. So a user could whisper, they could speak in a low voice, you know, in various places in the structure, never sure where the output would actually appear. So whispering into a vent on the bottom floor could actually trigger a video looking into the top floor, which is the visual of the basement. Listening to a pipe, the user can hear voices from other users around the structure. So nothing's what it seems on the surface of the building. The interior does definitely not meet the exterior. So when approaching another side of the building, a typewriter plays. And the sound is a bit low. There we go. So a typewriter plays as you approach the side of the building, as if someone is typing a subversive letter or perhaps a document. And then the motion sensor senses the user approach and switches suddenly from the sound of a typewriter to someone listening immediately to the radio out of fear. And here's an example of how the interface to the building, which is whispered through an actual floor deck, and acts visuals inside the structure through a low murmur or whisper. The huge challenge here was to have the video actually turn on, keep on advancing its film rate, stay on, and then have the video immediately cease with the voice. And this is the final build of the structure with its accompanying and chosen lighting in the gallery setting. Main circuit inside the structure, as you can see, it's a lot of DIY, do-it-yourself, with various microcontrollers, LED displays, the amplifier, and various circuits. So the key to technology here for the Whispers, it uses an adjusted gain and a proximity level to limit and significantly reduce background noise for other museum goers. It's necessary for an output to have the user be at a very, very close distance to the input on the edifice for the technology to recognize a whisper. In addition, a loud speaking voice will definitely not produce an output due to the code restrictions that I've written. The code listens for a certain decibel level, which is key, especially a tone, and that's a murmur, a whisper, or a very, very low voice for any reveal or interaction to take place. There also existed this echoed output when one whispered into any vent, any pipe, any actual input. The capture voice is set, I programmed it to a delay time, set in specified samples, which is determined by the sampling rate in the code, to specify distance, ambiguity, enclosed tonal spaces.
So much to talk to another about it that they simply like the stream.
So user testing demanded that the structure exist in a completely quiet setting. Not so much for the background noise interference, but for hearing the output of other whispers, the echo, and soft sounds inside the building. I wanted the users to feel this soft, expectant sense of voyeurism, and as they looked for what they had just enacted, the idea of hearing, watching, waiting, listening, I dealt with the relationships inside the building. So that being said, how can the human body enable new museum experiences? And how can we get rid of that, quote, barrier process of using mobile technology? And that's pulling out a mobile device, connecting to a wireless network, downloading an app that enables augmented reality, and then maybe perhaps launching a QR code, and then only then experiencing the architecture, the exhibit, as it was meant to be designed. So how can we use these ideas and this technology for, in essence, for navigation and data and information? So we're all familiar with the voice of technology, but using voice technology as a navigation for our narrative to recreate the architecture in a museum setting and to gather data about other museum goers experiencing the same setting in the museum and the historical time period presented is what I was interested in creating for this project. So for the design as an immersive full-scale exhibit, I used kind of plans from a reallocated apartment for living from the 1950s in St. Petersburg. 2 entrances for crowd control. The Whispers would seek to an area architecturally designed haphazardly, and that's made with false walls, temporary objects such as folding screens, curtains used to make privacy in a very, very small area. So we have contrasting, various, and non-continuous wood, wallpaper, cement that is apparent throughout. And these are the renderings from the full-scale exhibit I'm speaking of that comprise the interaction of both mannequin-like figures and museum goers as inputs and outputs. And I'm not going to talk during the video, so you actually get a feel of the atmosphere here.
Но это типа, тут типа, где луки, вот чешется либеральный, да, вот видите, да? Чешется либеральный. Nie to spieszył się na pracę, spieszył się na pracę. Что pracuje или я готова? To tak asi ja to bierzesz, a ty powiesz.
So as you can see, as information and data actually travel, I wanted the user to feel like any method of speaking, and that's any participant, that how mundane, no matter how mundane the user's conversation, leading to claustrophobia, wrong data, misuse of information, that all of this interaction and exhibit design also bring forth the discussion of the necessity of preserving the dignity of this time period, which I can actually, within this user platform, that I actually can explain and answer later. So this brings us back to why this essentially forgotten, anecdotal, yet important communication infrastructure is necessary to reiterate in this year of 2014. If the governments of the world with the United States filters information with digital surveillance, voyeurism, and espionage upon its own people as a state mandate, the mirrors to the Russian peoples during these 5-year plans are obvious. And I believe it's also a timely exhibit in that since the United States manufactures most of the operating systems, cloud services, and search engines for the world, it affects all countries. And in a surveillance state, no one is assumed as innocent. And if museums, I believe, are purportedly aimed to teach, The Whisperers purports to portray with current headlines how much we fail to pay attention and learn from our world history. Who's actually watching us, and how much do we know about our private data? How much do we know about who listens and looks at our secrets? And how does normal communication and telecommunication, once a method of free speech, emotion, human expression, become imprisoned to us all? And though it's from a Hollywood film, I'd like to leave you with a quote from the character M from the film Skyfall, which I feel expresses it best when she describes the current age of digital surveillance in 2012. And she's questioned about the current purpose of the British Secret Service and explains to a panel.
Well, I suppose I see a different world than you do. And the truth is that what I see frightens me. I'm frightened because our enemies are no longer known to us. They do not exist on a map. They're not nations. They're individuals. But look around you. Who do you fear? Can you see a face, a uniform, a flag? No. Our world is not more transparent now. It's more opaque. It's in the shadows. That's where we must do battle.
So to leave you, where do we do battle then at this point? At the expense of individual freedom, or as government agent Judi Dench expresses, inside and out of the same world? So I created The Whisperers as an exhibition designed to question privacy and surveillance, and importantly, on both sides, through a soft yet consequential time in history. So for further information on the experience, you can check out these links. And everyone, thank you so much for having me this morning.